Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into the Roman Forum. Just you, the cool morning air, and the whisper of a city not quite awake yet. A pale mist still hangs between the columns, softening every outline until the marble looks like it's breathing. You can almost smell the dew clinging to the stone, the faint mineral tang rising from the flagstones under your sandals. It's so early, even the pigeons seem reluctant to move, fluffing their feathers like grumpy old senators who came to the meeting too soon. You probably won't survive this kind of early start if you're not used to Roman mornings. But don't worry, this version doesn't come with chores or marching orders. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from somewhere far away, let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is there. I love seeing the little map we build together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand near the Arch of Septimius Severus. Though in this dawn haze, the relief carvings look more like dream shapes than history. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, ancient grooves carved by centuries of footsteps, cartwheels, and the occasional chariot. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, probably from a hilltop villa where someone important is still asleep. The Forum stretches before you like a museum with no glass, each ruin holding its breath before the day begins. You move slowly, your footsteps soft against the stones. The air smells faintly of smoke from last night's lamps and something herbal, perhaps the crushed mint that Romans used to freshen walkways near public areas. Historians still argue whether these scents were deliberate, a kind of civic air freshener, or simply the byproduct of obsessive cleanliness. Either way, the Forum smells surprisingly pleasant for a place that's seen 2,000 years of people and politics. The first golden light slides down from the Palatine Hill, striking the upper reaches of the Basilica of Maxentius. Its massive arches look almost weightless in this light, and for a moment you forget it's mostly ruin. The marble glows faintly pink, as if embarrassed by how beautiful it still manages to be. A few workers shuffle by carrying tools, muttering softly in Latin that sounds less like a dead language and more like morning grumbling, proof that some things never change. A fact you might enjoy, just to anchor yourself in this quiet: the Roman Forum wasn't originally a glamorous spot. Long before all this marble and grandeur, it was a swampy valley between hills. The Romans drained it with a massive sewer called the Cloaca Maxima, basically the ancient world's version of city planning meets mud wrestling. It's still down there somewhere, quietly doing its job after 2 millennia, which might be one of the most enduring pieces of plumbing in history. Somewhere, a Roman engineer is probably smug about it. You pass a marble column, still standing proudly beside a few toppled brothers. The surviving one is streaked with tiny green vines, like nature's graffiti reclaiming its space inch by inch. A sleepy guard dog sprawls nearby, twitching its paw in some canine dream, unbothered by your presence. You keep your pace slow. The trick is not to rush. The Forum isn't meant for hurry. It's a place that insists you measure time in shadows rather than seconds. As you move closer to the temple of Castor and Pollux, the mist thins. The twin columns loom tall, only 3 remain, but they hold their posture like disciplined soldiers. Somewhere behind them, the faint sound of sweeping echoes, someone clearing dust from the steps of a shrine. You can't see who it is, but you imagine a priest or caretaker humming quietly, maybe still half asleep. The broom makes a gentle rasp against the stone, the kind of white noise you could fall asleep to. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Roman priests often used wine instead of soap for ritual cleansing. Apparently the acidity helped, and it smelled divine. You can almost picture them pouring out a little amphora of cheap red and scrubbing the temple floor with the seriousness of a man mopping after a toga party. Scholars, naturally, can't agree if this was spiritual symbolism or just creative stain removal, but either way, it gives new meaning to the term divine vintage. A soft wind drifts through, brushing against your face like a passing thought. It carries the faintest echo of the Tiber River nearby, a low murmur behind the city's heartbeat. You look toward the horizon and see the Capitoline Hill crowned in light. For a brief moment, everything, the temples, the arches, the statues, seems to shimmer like they've woken up too. And maybe they have, in a way. You can feel the weight of history pressing gently against the present, like the Forum itself is aware of you walking through it. A few early risers appear now, a pair of old men in tunics arguing over the price of olive oil, their gestures exaggerated even though no one else is listening. A woman balancing a basket of herbs pauses near the rostra to rest, fanning herself with a sprig of laurel. You give her a nod. She returns it with that polite, "I'm awake but barely" expression universal to all mornings. The light catches her bronze hairpins, and for a second they gleam like little suns. You think about how ordinary and extraordinary this place must have felt back then. Commerce and conversation beneath gods carved in stone. Historians still debate the precise rhythm of daily life here. Did the Forum truly wake this early, or are we borrowing from poetic imagination? Ancient writers contradict each other. Some claim it buzzed before dawn, others that business didn't start until the second hour. Maybe both are true. Rome was big enough to hold many mornings at once. You take a seat on a broken step near the Arch of Titus, feeling the chill of stone seep through your clothes. It's oddly grounding. A small lizard darts across your path, its tiny claws ticking against the marble like impatient fingers. Somewhere high above, a crow caws 3 times, the sound cutting through the quiet like a reminder that time is moving, even when you're not. Another fact for your sleepy collection, the Arch of Titus was built to celebrate a victory, but right now, it's just a perch for that crow. Victories fade, crows remain. You can almost hear some philosopher muttering that under his breath, maybe Seneca himself if he were up this early. The irony would please him. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. The city is still stretching, still deciding what kind of day it wants to be. A cartwheel creaks in the distance. The faint clang of metal suggests someone setting up a stall. And then silence again, like the world inhaled and forgot to exhale. You breathe with it, slow and steady. If you focus, you can hear your own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the place. The Forum has always been a stage, politics, justice, ceremony. But right now, it's just you and the ghosts of marble, waiting for sunlight to find them. You stand, stretch a little, and start walking again toward the center, your shadow joining the long parade of those who came before. The mist lifts higher now, revealing colors. The pale gold of travertine, the dusky rose of brickwork, the faded green of bronze doors. Even the chipped edges gleam softly in this hour. You could stay here forever, just moving slowly, watching the day unfold grain by grain, like sand through a glass that never empties. A stray thought crosses your mind. How odd that this place, once the throbbing center of an empire, feels more peaceful than any quiet corner of the modern world. Maybe that's the gift of ruins. They've already seen it all, so they no longer rush. The sun finally slips over the top of the Curia, striking your face with a gentle warmth. The air feels alive now, but still hushed. You take another deep breath and step forward, ready to follow the city as it yawns into motion. The Forum is awake, and so are you, just barely. The mist has thinned by now, curling only in the corners of columns and under stone arches. You move toward the heart of the forum, where the market stalls are slowly taking shape like a dream remembering itself. A few wooden carts rattle in, their wheels squeaking in protest, pulled by sleepy donkeys who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. The ground beneath them crunches with bits of gravel and discarded olive pits, small reminders of yesterday's trade. You stop beside a row of low tables where the first vendors are setting up. The rhythm is unhurried, no shouting, no competition yet, just the soft thud of crates, the rustle of cloth being unrolled. You watch an old man spread out a sheet of faded red linen to display bronze trinkets. Miniature busts, keys, small coins, perhaps real, perhaps not. He catches your eye and gives a nod that says, "Not yet open," but there's no annoyance in it, only routine. This is his world, one morning among thousands. The air grows richer now. Someone's cutting into a wheel of cheese nearby, and the smell, sharp, tangy, earthy, floats through the square. Behind him, a woman unloads clay jars filled with honey, each one sealed with wax and marked with a little bee emblem. She hums under her breath, a tune so simple it could be a prayer or just a melody to pass the time. Her cart creaks with every shift of weight. You walk slowly, your sandals brushing dust from the cobblestones. The marketplace feels both eternal and fragile, like a heartbeat you can hear but not see. The vendors murmur greetings, half in Latin, half in that universal language of morning pleasantries. A young boy, probably an apprentice, scurries between stalls carrying baskets of figs. He looks tired but proud, like he's been trusted with the empire's most important mission, not dropping the fruit. You pause to admire the colors, the purple figs, the green of olives glistening in shallow bowls, the ivory glow of cheese wheels under canvas shade. Everything feels deliberate, balanced, calm. Even the flies move lazily, as if unwilling to disturb the peace. Here's your historical moment for the morning. The Roman Forum wasn't just a place for politics and temples, it was a genuine commercial hub. You could buy nearly anything here. Spices from Arabia, glassware from Alexandria, linen from Egypt, even exotic pets if you had the coin and the audacity. The wealthy strolled through in spotless tunics, while farmers from the countryside haggled with sharp-tongued market women. Rome may have conquered the world, but it still needed its groceries. A few steps farther, you see a man struggling to set up his stall of amphorae, tall clay jars filled with oil and wine. One slips and nearly tips over, but he catches it just in time. The near disaster earns a small laugh from nearby vendors, and he joins in, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. You imagine he's done this every morning for 20 years, and that every jar has its own story. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind identifying the workshop or the merchant, a kind of ancient barcode. Some even included little notes about the harvest or quality, proof that customer reviews existed long before Yelp. One famous amphora stamp from Pompeii even bragged, "Excellent wine, no headaches." Historians still argue whether that was an honest claim or ancient marketing spin, but either way, you kinda wish modern wines came with that guarantee. You drift closer to the edge of the forum, where the air feels cooler, shaded by tall porticos. A vendor unrolls bolts of cloth dyed in every hue the empire could conjure. Crimson from cochineal, deep blues from indigo, and soft yellows from saffron. She smooths each length of fabric with methodical care, her fingers moving like she's folding the morning itself. A few early customers approach, wealthy women with servants in tow, examining the weaves, debating prices that haven't yet been finalized. Their voices rise and fall softly, like the lapping of waves against a harbor wall. You find yourself smiling at how gentle the whole thing feels. There's no rush, no shouting matches over denarii, or foot traffic pushing you along. Just the slow choreography of people who know the day will unfold no matter what. From somewhere behind the Basilica Julia comes the faint thump of bread being kneaded. You can almost time your steps to it, steady and sure. We'll get to that baker soon enough, but for now, this market holds your attention. You crouch beside a stall where a man sells herbs and remedies, bundles of thyme, sage, and lavender tied with twine. The scent is intoxicating, a wild mix of earth and comfort. You ask what he recommends for sleep, and without missing a beat, he hands you a tiny bundle of poppy petals. For dreams, he says. You decide not to ask for specifics. Another fact drifts in. Some Roman vendors would sprinkle their stalls with perfumed water to keep flies away and attract customers. The scent was usually rose or myrrh, but one particularly eccentric merchant in the late Republic was said to use vinegar mixed with crushed violets, because supposedly the gods enjoy variety. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just the invention of one chronic overachiever. Either way, you're grateful for the aroma cutting through the morning air. A small commotion draws your gaze, two traders disputing something near the olive stand. Their tones are low, measured, but the gestures are unmistakably Roman. Wide arms, dramatic shrugs, palms turned skyward as if appealing directly to Jupiter. One accuses the other of watering down oil to stretch the profits. The accused counters with wounded pride. In the end, they settle with a handshake and a muttered laugh. You get the sense they'll repeat this same performance tomorrow and the next day, like a well-rehearsed play everyone enjoys too much to stop. As the sun climbs higher, the marble under your feet starts to warm. Shadows shorten, and the forum hums a little louder. But still, there's a serenity to it. The clinking of coins, the quiet shuffle of sandals, the distant splash of a fountain, all combine into a kind of ancient lullaby. You lean against a column, close your eyes, and just listen. You catch snippets of Latin phrases, half bargains, half jokes. One woman teases another about her choice of sandals. A man swears his honey is the same recipe once served to Caesar himself. You doubt it, but he sells 2 jars on the claim alone. Somewhere a donkey brays, reminding everyone that commerce may be grand, but it's still carried on the backs of beasts. You think about how, centuries from now, these sounds will fade into silence, and tourists will stand where you stand, imagining this exact moment. It's strange how a simple morning of unpacking and setting up shop could carry so much life. But maybe that's what makes it beautiful. Rome wasn't always about glory and conquest. Sometimes it was just about getting the stall ready before the rush. A gust of wind passes through, tugging lightly at your tunic. Dust motes swirl like gold in the sunbeams, and you feel time blur, the present dissolving into something softer, older. You realize that in this quiet rhythm, there's something profoundly peaceful, a city exhaling before its day begins. A voice calls out behind you, someone offering roasted chickpeas, warm and spiced. You accept a handful, crunching slowly. They taste nutty and comforting, like the Roman equivalent of street popcorn. You chew, breathe, and watch as the market continues to wake around you. You can already see where your path leads next, toward the bakery down the lane, where the air grows thick with the promise of bread and the warmth of stone ovens. But for now, you linger, watching the last of the vendors finish their setup. The market is ready. The forum has found its rhythm, and you're just one more quiet observer, wrapped in sunlight and ancient routine. The smell reaches you before you even turn the corner, warm, yeasty, with a faint sweetness that seems to pull you forward like an invisible hand. The marketplace chatter fades behind you, replaced by the soft percussion of kneading. Thump, fold, stretch, sigh. You follow the rhythm until it becomes almost musical, a heartbeat you can walk to. Ahead, the bakery is little more than a squat stone building with an arched doorway blackened by smoke. A plume of steam drifts lazily from a vent in the roof, carrying the scent of fresh loaves into the open air. The baker himself stands inside, sleeves rolled up, arms dusted in flour to the elbows, his hair clumped with heat and effort. He glances at you briefly, just long enough to nod, then returns to his dough with the quiet dedication of someone who doesn't need to look up to know exactly what he's doing. You step closer. The air here is thick and heavy with warmth. It wraps around you like a blanket, instantly comforting, instantly soporific. You lean against the doorway, content to watch the ritual unfold. He lifts a mound of dough from the table, presses his fists into it, folds, turns, presses again. The sound is steady, hypnotic. You could fall asleep standing here if you weren't so busy inhaling. A small boy appears from the back, carrying a tray of flatbreads ready for baking. He looks to be about 10, but he moves with precision, clearly trained in this morning rhythm. He slides the tray toward the baker, who nods approvingly and begins scoring lines across the surface with a bronze blade. The cuts are shallow but deliberate, giving the bread space to rise. Each motion is slow, careful, almost meditative. You've seen sculptures of emperors, warriors, gods, but there's something about this ordinary act that feels more eternal. The baker isn't chasing glory or conquest. He's chasing consistency. The right color, the right texture, the right scent when it's done. Every loaf a small, edible act of perfectionism. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the day. Ancient Roman bakeries like this one often supplied not just the public, but also the army. Bread was the backbone of Rome, literally. Soldiers received part of their wages as grain, which they ground themselves into flour. Later, when central bakeries like this became common, it symbolized a shift in society. People depended more on the system than their own mills. Bread, as simple as it sounds, was a cornerstone of Roman civilization. The baker opens the heavy stone oven, and a wave of heat rolls out so strong it makes your eyes sting. Inside, you glimpse the glowing coals pushed to the sides, the center cleared for baking. He slides the loaves in with a wooden paddle, the dough sizzling faintly as it touches the hot stone. The door closes, and he exhales, wiping his brow with a towel that's probably seen better days. You notice a jar sitting nearby filled with what looks like old dough, bubbly, alive. That's the leavening, the ancestor of sourdough starter. Some bakers guarded their mix like treasure, passing it down through generations. One story claims a family in Pompeii had the same starter for 3 lifetimes before Vesuvius ended its career in one very abrupt baking session. Historians still argue whether these old doughs actually improved flavor or just made bakers feel superstitious security, but you suspect it's a bit of both. The boy sneaks a small piece of raw dough and pops it in his mouth, grimacing instantly. The baker catches him, raises an eyebrow, but only chuckles. "Too soon," you can almost hear him say. It's a lesson every apprentice learns. The patience between mixing and baking is sacred. You smile, because even in this empire of power and marble, someone somewhere is still just trying to teach a kid not to eat the raw ingredients. The rhythm picks up again. More dough is shaped into small, round loaves called panis quadratus, the kind archaeologists have found carbonized in Pompeii's ruins. Each loaf is divided into 8 wedges with string before baking, making it easier to share or sell in portions later. You wonder what these would taste like fresh from the oven, steaming and soft inside, maybe with a smear of honey or olive oil. Your stomach growls audibly, and even though no one reacts, you feel slightly embarrassed. You glance toward the street where a few early customers have gathered, mostly workers, their faces lined from long hours. They wait patiently, coins ready in hand. One woman carries a basket of herbs, likely for trade instead of payment. The baker finishes arranging the loaves and gestures for them to wait. The first batch isn't ready yet, and the forum's unofficial rule is clear. Good bread takes time. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman bakers used to stamp their bread with a small seal, an image or initials pressed into the dough before baking. It marked ownership and quality, much like a brand logo today. One surviving loaf even bears the inscription, "Property of seller, slave of Quintus Granius Verus," which really brings perspective to marketing. It's one thing to promote your product, another to remind everyone who technically owns you. Rome was efficient, but not always kind. The oven door opens again. This time, the smell is overwhelming. Warm crust, caramelized grain, the faintest edge of smoke. The baker uses the paddle to draw the loaves out one by one, tapping each lightly to test for the hollow sound that means it's done. The boy follows, arranging them in neat rows along the counter. Steam rises in little ghosts from every loaf, and you realize this might be the most comforting sight in all of ancient Rome. The first customer steps forward, trading a few coins for 2 loaves. The baker wraps them in a thin piece of linen, careful not to trap too much moisture. The exchange is wordless, efficient, human. Another man offers a handful of onions instead of money, and the baker accepts without hesitation. Barter is as good as coin when the bread is this good. Historians still debate whether these bakeries were privately owned or state-controlled, at least in certain districts. Some records suggest Augustus himself introduced regulations to prevent price gouging and bread riots. Rome took its carbs seriously. In fact, the phrase bread and circuses came from this very relationship. Feed the people, entertain them, and they'll stay calm. It's oddly familiar, isn't it? Swap the circuses for streaming services, and not much has changed. You linger a little longer, watching as the baker takes a rare break, sitting on a low stool near the doorway. He sips from a clay cup, probably watered wine, and gazes out toward the now bustling forum. For a moment, he looks peaceful. His hands rest on his knees, streaked white with flour, the faintest smile on his lips. You imagine he's thinking about his family, or maybe just counting the hours until the next batch. The boy sweeps stray flour from the floor, the broom rasping softly. You notice faint footprints everywhere, marks of motion, of habit. This is the quiet side of empire. No speeches, no parades, just small acts repeated until they shape a civilization. The baker catches your eye again and gestures toward a cooling loaf. You hesitate, then step forward as he breaks it in half. The crust crackles and steam rolls out in a thick wave of scent. He offers it wordlessly. You take a piece, bite slowly, and almost laugh. It's perfect. Dense but tender, slightly tangy, the flavor of heat and time. You nod in gratitude. He shrugs, as if to say, it's just bread. But it isn't. It's Rome, distilled into something you can taste. You chew slowly, savoring every crumb as the forum outside grows louder. The merchants call, the donkeys bray, the sun climbs higher. But here, in the dim warmth of the bakery, time stretches thin and soft. When you finally step back out into the sunlight, the air feels cooler against your skin. You can still smell the bread clinging to your clothes, a faint reminder of the morning's ritual. The market hums now in full voice, but somewhere behind you, the steady rhythm of kneading continues, unchanged, eternal, comforting. You take a deep breath and begin walking again, the taste of bread still on your tongue, the scent of flour following like a memory that refuses to fade. You leave the bakery behind with one last glance over your shoulder, the scent of fresh bread still clinging to you like warmth in your chest. The street opens up again into the wide marble expanse of the Forum, and the sound changes. Less chatter now, more space between footsteps. Ahead, the Curia Julia rises from the stone like a calm giant, its brick facade catching the mid-morning light. This is where the Senate meets, or at least where it once did. Right now, though, it's quiet. The heavy bronze doors are shut, their hinges gleaming faintly. You can almost imagine the ghosts of senators lingering nearby, still whispering arguments that have long since lost their urgency. Cicero's voice, sharp and weary, somewhere between thunder and sigh. You step closer, half expecting to hear an echo of applause or outrage. Instead, there's only the soft coo of a pigeon nesting above the doorway. The air here feels different, heavier somehow, as if soaked with decisions. The marble steps in front of the Curia are smooth from centuries of sandals, a kind of accidental polish that only time can make. You sit down on one, careful of the chill that seeps through your clothes. From here, you can see nearly the entire Forum. Merchants still move below, carts creak, laughter drifts, but this spot feels slightly removed from it all, like sitting backstage in a play after the curtain has fallen. You look up at the structure itself. It's simple compared to the temples nearby. No frills, no columns trying to outshine the sky. Just a tall, rectangular building with purpose. The kind of place that doesn't need to shout to command attention. The Romans rebuilt it several times, of course. Fires, politics, fashion. But somehow it always returned to this shape. Stubborn, dignified, immovable. Here's your historical fact for this stretch of calm. The Curia Julia standing here was commissioned by Julius Caesar himself around 44 BCE. Ironically, he never lived to see it finished. His assassination halted construction for a while. Augustus, ever the tidy successor, saw it completed. For centuries afterward, the Senate gathered here to argue laws, wars, and gossip, sometimes all three at once. You trace a crack in the stone with your finger, wondering how many sandals crossed this same spot, how many hands touched the same railing, how many minds plotted empires right where you're sitting. The thought should feel grand, but instead, it feels quiet. The same way an empty theater feels after a performance. Echoes, yes, but also peace. A man walks past, leading a mule with a small cart. The animal's hooves clop rhythmically on the pavement, its tail flicking lazily at flies. The cart holds scrolls bundled in leather, perhaps official notices or messages from the provinces. You imagine this courier has walked these stones countless times, each delivery another thread in Rome's endless network of motion. He glances up at the Curia, then quickly away, as if reluctant to meet its solemn gaze. You can't blame him. The Senate had power once, but power can be intimidating even in memory. Historians still argue whether the senators were noble guardians of the Republic or self-serving aristocrats playing politics like chess. Maybe both. The truth probably lives somewhere between idealism and lunch breaks. You picture them gathering inside, rows of men in white togas edged with purple, murmuring beneath the high wooden ceiling. No microphones, no cameras, just voices and egos. Someone clears his throat. Someone else mutters, "Quid nunc?" What now? It's not hard to imagine, because the silence left behind still hums with that energy. You notice the mosaic tiles that once adorned the entrance. Tiny, intricate pieces. You notice the mosaic tiles that once adorned the entrance. Tiny, intricate pieces of marble forming patterns that catch the light. A few have loosened over the centuries, leaving small gaps that look like missing teeth. One tile glints gold where it shouldn't, as if a modern coin has found its way into history's floor. You smile at the thought. Rome has always collected souvenirs, even from the future. A breeze sweeps through, brushing the hem of your tunic. The air smells faintly of metal and dust, a reminder that the Forum is still alive beneath the ruin. You lean back on your elbows, gazing at the sky. A pair of swallows dart above, cutting sharp arcs against the blue. Somewhere behind you, a guard coughs discreetly, one of those small human sounds that anchors time. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. In ancient sessions, senators were required to wear sandals without iron nails so their footsteps wouldn't echo too loudly across the marble floor. Imagine that, laws decided in silence, not out of humility, but acoustics. You wonder if that's what the world needs now. More quiet decision-making, fewer clattering shoes. You shift your gaze to the rostra, the speaker's platform just across the square. It's empty now, but you can still sense the echoes of speeches. The bronze rostra, those decorative ship prows, once gleamed along its edge, trophies from naval victories. The symbolism was clear. Rome conquered the seas, and now the Senate ruled the waves. Except now it's pigeons who rule this perch, strutting around like tiny senators without agendas. The sun warms your face. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the city drift in. The baker's boy calling, a vendor's laugh, a wheel scraping stone. Beneath it all, there's that faint heartbeat again, the rhythm of the Forum itself. It's steady, unhurried, like the world's oldest metronome. After a while, you rise and wander closer to the building. The bronze doors tower over you, massive and cool to the touch. They were once repurposed from another temple, moved here centuries ago, because Romans were practical like that. Why make new doors when perfectly good ones already existed somewhere else? You rest your palm against the metal. It's smooth, cold, and faintly humming, as if it remembers every decree it has heard pass through. You imagine the chaos inside during Rome's busier years. Heated arguments, parchment flying, voices raised over the din. And yet now, only silence remains. You think about how strange it must be to go from deciding the fate of the world to becoming a quiet relic for pigeons and tourists. Time has a wicked sense of humor. You take a few steps down, toward the open square again, and glance back. The building looks gentler from this angle, less like a fortress of politics, more like a patient witness. If walls could sigh, this one probably would. A group of children dart across the plaza chasing each other, their laughter ringing high against the stones. For a moment, the scene feels timeless, new life running through old bones. You can't help but grin. The Forum, after all, wasn't built for ghosts. It was built for people. And people, despite everything, keep finding their way back. You think of one last historical whisper. The Curia Julia later became a church in the 7th century, long after the empire's pulse had faded. Maybe that's why it survived when so much else didn't. Repurposed faith keeping ancient walls alive. Historians still debate whether that conversion was preservation or sacrilege. But standing here, you can't help but think it was both. A blend of reverence and irony that Rome would have appreciated. The sunlight brightens. The marble beneath your feet glows pale gold. Somewhere nearby, a lyre begins to play. Soft, uncertain notes drifting through the morning air. You turn toward the sound, half expecting to see a musician perched on a step, plucking strings for coins or pleasure. The music fades as quickly as it began, but the feeling lingers, calm, reflective, a reminder that even empires need their quiet days. You take one last look at the Curia Julia, its shadow long and dignified across the Forum floor. Then you move on, your footsteps slow and soft, carrying that silence with you. The Senate may have gone quiet, but Rome hasn't. It just learned to speak more gently. You follow the sound of rushing water before you even see it. Rome, despite its dust and marble, has a way of hiding water like a secret. The streets narrow, then open again into an enormous courtyard. Stone, arches, and light. Before you rises the Baths of Caracalla, a place built not just for washing, but for being human in the fullest sense. At first glance, it feels less like a bathhouse and more like a temple dedicated to leisure. Towering walls of brick and concrete rise into the blue, their outlines softened by time. Bits of mosaic still cling to the floors, tiny flashes of color, sea creatures, wrestlers, vines, gods lounging beside urns of overflowing water. You can almost hear the faint echo of laughter, splashes, idle chatter. This isn't a place of luxury reserved for the few. It was once a gift to the people. When Emperor Caracalla commissioned it around 212 CE, he wanted it vast enough for thousands, citizens of every stripe, from senators to cobblers. Entry was cheap, sometimes even free. The baths were Rome's social heartbeat, open and alive from sunrise until sunset. You step closer, your sandals crunching over fragments of marble. The scent of damp stone lingers in the air, as though the walls themselves still sweat from ancient steam. The silence is immense, but not empty. It hums with the memory of voices. The rhythm of the caldarium's heat. Steam billowing from bronze cauldrons beneath the floor. The sudden gasp of someone stepping from the hot room into the frigidarium's plunge pool. A dozen conversations about grain prices, gossip, or poetry. Even senators came here stripped of their rank, their purple-edged togas replaced by simple cloths. In the baths, everyone was human first, Roman second. You wander deeper inside, through what's left of the main hall. The ceilings are gone now, open to the sky, but you can still sense the scale. The original vaults soared nearly 40 meters high, painted with gods of water and fortune. Sunlight spills in through the gaps, illuminating the dust like steam frozen mid-air. To your left lies what once was the palaestra, the exercise yard. You can almost see men wrestling there, their bodies glistening with oil and sweat, attendants scraping it off with bronze strigils. Fitness and philosophy weren't separate here, they were part of the same ritual. A man might debate politics while lifting weights made from lead and stone. It's oddly modern, this blend of vanity and virtue. Nearby, a cracked marble bench curves around the edge of the courtyard. You sit for a moment, running your hand over the surface. It's cool despite the sun. Somewhere below you, deep in the earth, lie the remains of the hypocaust, the ancient heating system. Hot air once rushed through these tunnels, warming the floors and baths above. It's said that maintaining it required an entire workforce of slaves and engineers, feeding furnaces day and night. All that labor, just so others could relax. Rome's comforts were always built on invisible hands. A modern breeze stirs dust from the mosaic floor. The pattern beneath you depicts dolphins twining around a trident, their scales picked out in blue and green glass. You trace one with your fingertip, thinking about how long it must have taken an artisan to place each tiny piece. Some things were made to last centuries, and somehow they have. A pair of tourists pass in the distance, their voices faint, cameras glinting like small mirrors. They pause beneath a great arch, look up, and fall quiet. The baths have that effect. You don't need to know history to feel reverence here. And yet, history lingers in every corner. Caracalla himself was not known for gentleness. His reign was marked by cruelty and paranoia. He murdered his own brother, Geta, and had his name erased from every monument. But the baths survived him, almost as if the building decided to outlive the man who ordered it. In a strange way, this place became Rome's apology, its offering of beauty after blood. You walk toward the remnants of the caldarium, the hot room. Its circular base still hints at grandeur. The marble once gleamed under the light of bronze braziers, and the water shimmered in enormous pools. You imagine stepping into that warmth after a long day, muscles loosening, mind slowing. The Romans didn't just bathe, they soaked in civilization itself. After bathing, many would stroll into adjoining libraries, read scrolls, or discuss philosophy. The baths were a whole ecosystem of culture, part gym, part gallery, part cafe. One could spend the entire afternoon here, and many did. You think about that balance, work and leisure, body and mind, and how rare it is now. In the distance, a stray cat wanders along the edge of the ruins, pausing to sniff at a column base. You watch its small, deliberate steps, how it disappears behind a shadow, then re-emerges further down. Time feels folded here, like the past is walking alongside you, half visible, half imagined. Another fun detail floats up from memory. Roman bathers used olive oil instead of soap. They'd rub it on their skin, then scrape it off with the strigil, taking the dirt with it. Afterward, they'd perfume themselves lightly, something floral, maybe myrrh or rose. You can almost catch the faint ghost of scent lingering in the stone pores. The afternoon light grows softer now, slanting gold through the broken arches. Somewhere, a bird calls. You can hear the echo bounce through the chamber and return smaller, like a whisper remembering itself. You follow it toward the far end of the complex, where the Natacchio, the great swimming pool, once stretched. It's enormous, even now, even empty. The pool's basin lies cracked and half filled with weeds. You can still see the marble lining, faintly blue under centuries of dust. Imagine hundreds of people here once, wading, laughing, floating in the open air. Children splashing while older men leaned on the edges, arguing about politics or quoting Virgil. The water would have shimmered beneath a canopy of light, the air thick with chatter. Now, only the wind moves across it. You close your eyes and try to hear the water again. The rhythmic slap of waves against marble, the burst of laughter, the sudden splash. It's almost there, a memory pressed between silence and imagination. Standing on the pool's edge, you realize something quietly profound. Rome wasn't just an empire of conquest or politics, it was an empire of daily life. It cared about comfort, about ritual, about routine. Even its grandeur was practical. The baths remind you that civilization isn't measured by monuments alone, but by how people spent their afternoons. The sun begins its descent, gilding everything in honey light. You walk back through the ruins, the long shadows stretching ahead. A column base catches your eye, carved faintly with graffiti, the kind that ancient visitors scratched into stone. One reads, "Aelius bathed well here." You smile. Some things never change. People have always left small marks to prove they existed. As you reach the exit archway, you turn for one last look. The baths of Caracalla glow in the late light, walls ablaze with gold and rose tones. For a moment, it looks whole again. You can almost see steam rising from the roofs, hear the splash of water, smell the oils. It's like the city itself exhales, alive once more. Then the wind shifts and the vision fades. You stand quietly, feeling the warmth on your skin, and realize that the calm you feel isn't just from the place. It's from the rhythm of history itself. The Romans built spaces not only to wash away dirt, but also to wash away the noise of the world. And even after 2,000 years, that silence still works. You take a deep breath, Step out through the last arch, and the city swallows you again, its modern heartbeat pulsing just beyond the ruins. Behind you, the baths rest in their eternal afternoon, half forgotten, half awake, whispering through the stones. Be still, be clean, be humans, be still. The faint burble of running water until it draws you toward a quiet corner of the forum where a fountain still trickles, the sound soft and deliberate like a whisper repeating itself. The basin is shallow, carved from pale stone, and ringed by small tufts of grass pushing up between cracks. The water gleams in the light, a moving mirror that catches the drifting clouds above. You pause here, letting your eyes adjust to the gentleness of it. There's something hypnotic about a fountain in the middle of so much stone. It makes you wonder how often Romans must have stood here too, using this same pool to rinse their hands or fill clay jugs before heading home. A few people gather near it now, modern tourists with cameras slung around their necks. But if you blink slowly, you can almost replace them with the citizens who once stood here. Women in long tunics with baskets balanced on their hips, children chasing one another barefoot through puddles, a man with a donkey cart waiting patiently while his amphora fills. The fountain's voice doesn't rise above the bustle, it joins it. It's the heartbeat of the square, soft but constant. You step closer and crouch, trailing your fingers through the water. It's cool, with that faint mineral tang that every ancient spring seems to share. You let it run over your palm, and for a second, you're part of the city's quiet machinery, another Roman performing an ordinary act that somehow feels eternal. In ancient times, fountains weren't just decoration. They were infrastructure, public utilities fed by the aqueducts that laced through the hills. The Aqua Marcia, the Aqua Claudia, the Aqua Virgo, all masterpieces of engineering that carried water for miles using nothing but gravity. You remember reading that one aqueduct could supply hundreds of thousands of people every day. The flow so constant that Rome could boast more clean water per citizen than many modern cities. Historians still argue whether that abundance made Rome more civilized or simply more complacent. But standing here, you can't help admiring the serenity it created. You watch as a small bird flits down, dips its beak into the pool, and takes a drink. Its feathers ripple with each swallow. It hops along the stone lip, perfectly balanced, as if testing every inch for the right temperature. Then it takes off again, vanishing into the canopy of nearby cypress trees. Around you, voices murmur, soft, indistinct, blending into the hum of the square. Two elderly men lean against the fountain's edge, one gesturing animatedly while the other nods in half-listening agreement. They could be debating politics, or they could just be talking about the weather. You imagine their ancient counterparts doing exactly the same 2,000 years ago. The details change, but the rhythm of conversation never does. You take a seat on the low wall that surrounds the fountain. The stone is smooth, worn into a shallow curve by countless hands and robes brushing against it. Someone once scratched a crude fish into the surface, a Christian symbol maybe, from centuries later when faith had shifted but the fountain remained. You trace the outline absently, feeling the groove beneath your fingertips. From where you sit, you can see the Temple of Castor and Pollux rising in the distance, its three marble columns like fingers reaching toward the sky. The light catches on them, turning them almost translucent. Between you and the temple lies a mosaic of shadow, pigeons drifting lazily, a few stray cats winding through the stones, the occasional tourist muttering to themselves about directions. And yet, it all feels balanced here. The fountain seems to quiet the world down, as if the water itself absorbs the chatter, the footsteps, the pulse of everything moving around it. You imagine how it must have sounded in the 2nd century. The slap of sandals, the call of vendors, the occasional neigh of a horse pulling a cart. Over all of it, this steady murmur of water, connecting everything. You close your eyes and try to layer those sounds together, modern air blending with ancient echoes. For a moment, you're nowhere and everywhere in time. You lean back, watching droplets leap up from the surface when a breeze passes. They sparkle briefly before falling back. The Romans loved these small water features, not because they were extravagant, but because they made a city feel alive. 1,000 fountains once filled Rome, each one whispering the same thing: the city endures. A strange, almost comic detail floats into your mind. Romans used to believe that certain springs had divine guardians, little deities called nymphae or genii loci, spirits of place who kept the water pure. People sometimes left offerings for them: coins, flowers, even small cakes. Somewhere beneath this very fountain, there might still be ancient coins corroded into the earth, offerings to gods no one remembers by name. You smile at the thought of it, an invisible treasury of good intentions. The sound of the fountain shifts slightly, the rhythm broken by someone dipping a bottle in the stream. You glance over. A young couple fills it halfway, then taste the water, laughing quietly when it proves fresher than expected. A tiny gesture of modern pilgrimage. You can almost imagine them as ancient lovers sneaking away from the forum crowd. A breeze drifts through, carrying with it a mix of smells: dust, olive oil from a nearby cafe, and the faint mineral tang of the fountain. Somewhere down the street, a scooter revs, then fades again, like an echo of chariot wheels. You watch the ripples reform on the water's surface, each one widening, merging, then smoothing back into stillness. You think of a line from a Roman poet, maybe Ovid, something about water remembering everything it touches. It's a comforting thought. Maybe these fountains still remember every voice that's ever leaned close, every coin tossed, every confession whispered beneath their murmur. A few paces away, a street musician sets up with a guitar. The melody he plays is soft, deliberate, repetitive, almost hypnotic. It weaves around the fountain sound until you can't tell where the notes end and the water begins. You breathe slower without meaning to. It's that kind of place. The marble glows faintly now, the afternoon sun dipping low enough to cast long streaks of light across the basin. You notice how the water refracts it. Little golden waves dance across the underside of the rim. It looks like the fountain is alive, breathing light in and out. You dip your fingers once more into the stream and feel the same coolness as before. Maybe cooler. You let it run down your wrist, tracing the path of the ancient aqueduct in miniature. Somewhere, far from here, that same line of water still begins in the hills, still trickles through the same stone channels the Romans carved. 2,000 years of continuous flow. It's hard not to be impressed by that. Historians still argue whether the Romans' obsession with water came from utility or symbolism. Was it simply engineering genius, or a spiritual need to feel connected to something flowing and eternal? You lean toward the latter. Water was life, spectacle, status, and solace, all at once. Maybe it still is. A child nearby throws a coin into the basin. It lands with a soft plink, barely rippling the surface. You catch a flash of silver before it settles. The child claps, delighted, as if they've just made a wish. You find yourself doing the same silently. No coin, no wish, just a brief hope that whatever memory lingers in this place keeps flowing a little longer. The wind rises again, cool and carrying the scent of wet stone. You close your eyes and let the sounds overlap. The trickle, the chatter, the faint strum of guitar, and somewhere beneath it all, the invisible hum of time moving slowly forward. For a long while, you just sit there, breathing with the fountain. You realize that peace isn't always found in silence. Sometimes it's hidden in repetition, in water looping endlessly, in footsteps tracing old routes, in the familiar pulse of a city that has never truly stopped talking to itself. When you finally rise, droplets still cling to your fingertips. They glimmer for a second before drying away, leaving only a faint coolness behind. You glance back once more at the fountain. It doesn't look like much from a distance, just another relic among thousands. But you know better now. The fountain isn't trying to impress. It's simply doing what it has always done, flowing, murmuring, reminding you that even in a city of emperors and ruins, there's room for something small, ordinary, and endlessly gentle. For something small, ordinary, and ending the curved shadow of a column until the world cools again under a shaded portico. The sun glows beyond the edge like an idea you've decided to postpone, and here, in the soft half-light, a row of wooden tables lines the marble floor. This is the Basilica Aemilia, or what's left of it, and beneath its wide roof once sat Rome's scribes, clerks, and letter-writers, the quiet machinery of an empire built from words. It's calm here, even now. The air smells faintly of wax and dust, of parchment and patience. You hear the low hum of scratching, pen on surface, so constant it could almost be a sound your imagination's making up. Then again, maybe it isn't. Maybe the stones still replay the noise of styluses pressing into wax tablets, of papyrus being smoothed flat, of someone clearing their throat before reading aloud a contract. You picture them easily, the scribes of the Forum, tunics belted high, sandals scuffed from long hours, ink stains marking fingers and cuffs. They worked for merchants, for magistrates, for anyone who needed the authority of a written word. Rome was, after all, a city of paperwork. Even the gods had registries, if you believed the priests. You drift closer to one of the tables, your hand brushing its edge. It's smooth in places, gouged in others, the record of centuries' worth of elbows and quills. The wax tablets these men used were simple, wood frames filled with beeswax. They'd inscribe letters with a stylus, then smooth it over again with the flat end, erasing and reusing endlessly, recycling before it was fashionable. You smile at the thought. The scribe before you, let's imagine him for a moment, is called Lucius. He's been sitting here since dawn, copying out an inventory of olive shipments. His handwriting is neat, elegant, almost architectural. He dips his stylus into a small pot of ink made from soot and gum. Every few lines, he pauses to blow gently on the surface, drying it before rolling the papyrus further. He's not an artist, but there's something artistic about the ritual. You watch as another man approaches, a merchant perhaps, smelling faintly of salt and sun. He leans on the table, muttering in Latin that your mind fills in as best it can. Something about a missed payment, a late arrival, a ship damaged at Ostia. Lucius listens, nods, and begins to write. The words flow like the fountain you left behind, steady, precise, indifferent to the emotion behind them. The merchant leaves, lighter by a few coins, but heavier with bureaucratic peace of mind. Lucius scratches his head, rolls his shoulders, and returns to his ledger. You can almost feel the ache between his shoulder blades. You've been there too, hours bent over a desk, eyes blurring, mind wandering. Some forms of labor don't change. Outside, the Forum hums with sunlight and footsteps, but under this roof, the world feels suspended. The shade cools the stone, and time slows to the rhythm of wax and ink. A stray breeze slips through one of the open arches, stirring the edges of parchment. Dust dances in the shaft of light, each mote golden and deliberate. Across the way, another scribe yawns and leans back, his chair creaking. He scratches a note into the margin of his document. Nothing official, maybe a small joke, maybe a complaint. Historians have found such scribbles in Roman records, doodles, sarcastic comments, even insults to supervisors. One famous tablet reads, "I wrote this while half asleep." You can't help but love that. Bureaucracy with a heartbeat. Somewhere further down the portico, a group of apprentices argue quietly. One insists that the plural of forum is fora. Another insists it's forums. Historians still argue about that too, which is comforting in a strange way. Human pedantry might be the most timeless thing of all. You lean against a column, feeling the coolness soak through your sleeve. The marble is veined with faint greens and reds, as if the earth itself once tried to paint. Through the gaps in the colonnade, you glimpse the forum's heart. The movement, the merchants, the priests, all of it, framed like a living mural. The scribes have the best view, you think. They watch the city while never quite belonging to it. He sighs, dips his stylus again, and keeps going. You wonder if he dreams of writing something that isn't a receipt, maybe a poem or a letter to someone he misses. But then, maybe that's the point. Rome ran on the mundane. The glory of the empire depended on men like him keeping track of figs and wine and debt. History, when you get close to it, is mostly paperwork. A faint crackle interrupts your thoughts. One of the oil lamps sputters, its wick drowning in its own fuel. Lucius leans over and adjusts it with practiced care. You realize he'll be here until sunset, maybe longer, the flickering light throwing long shadows across the parchment. To your left, a small boy, his apprentice, perhaps, balances a tray of scrolls almost as tall as he is. He drops one with a thud that echoes down the hall. Everyone freezes for a second, then a few chuckle softly. The boy blushes, stoops, and gathers the scrolls again. You catch Lucius smiling faintly, just enough to be human. Outside, a bell rings faintly, signaling noon. The sound drifts through the columns and dissolves into the air. Lunch will come soon. For now, though, the scribes continue their rhythm. Scratch, pause, breathe, scratch again. It's almost musical, like the slow plucking of strings. There's a small, almost forgotten detail that always makes historians grin. The Basilica Aemilia was famous for the faint scent of money, literally. In its later years, bronze coins were melted down nearby to mint new currency, and the metallic tang would waft through the air. People complained, but they kept coming, because bureaucracy, like money, has its own gravity. You imagine that smell mingling with wax and parchment, forming a kind of invisible perfume of Roman administration. Not unpleasant, just practical. Lucius pauses again, rubbing his eyes. He dips his stylus one last time and scratches a final line before setting it down. He stretches, groans softly, then stands to walk toward the light. You follow him to the edge of the portico. Outside, the sun flares bright and warm, and for a second, you both blink against it. You think about how many lives passed like his, half in shadow, half in sunlight, writing the empire one mark at a time. Their names mostly lost, their words erased, their work forming the invisible spine of history. Rome remembers its emperors in marble, but it was the scribes who made sure anyone remembered anything at all. Lucius steps into the open air, squinting. His tunic flutters lightly in the breeze. He looks, for just a moment, utterly ordinary, and that's exactly what makes him extraordinary. The empire depended on ordinary. You linger under the portico a little longer, breathing in the coolness one more time. The smell of wax, dust, and sunlight feels grounding somehow. Then you step out too, following the slow rhythm of the forum. The sound of scratching fades behind you, replaced by the pulse of footsteps and voices. And yet, you can still hear it faintly, like an echo in your chest. The slow, deliberate scratch of history being written one line at a time. Scratch of history be the murmur of the Senate steps and follow the gentle slope of stone leading toward the heart of Roman leisure, the open plaza where citizens idle, gossip, and squint at the market boards. The noise isn't harsh, not today. The forum feels like it's exhaling after a long debate. Sunlight pools across the travertine paving stones, warm and patient. You pass a baker's stall with a crusty loaf display that looks almost too symmetrical to be real. Each loaf scored neatly with an X, as if even bread in Rome must be disciplined. The baker yawns, dusts his apron, and waves lazily at no one in particular. There's a scent here that's oddly comforting: smoke, olive oil, and that faint metallic tang of coins changing hands. A small group of older men sits on a low wall talking about chariot races that won't happen for another week. They sound just as invested as modern fans arguing about playoffs. One of them gestures wildly with a stick of dried fig, proclaiming that the Blues will never beat the Greens, and you almost smile. It's like overhearing the world's first sports talk show, minus the microphones. You pass by a column carved with spirals, its surface uneven from time and touch. The inscription near its base is half-worn, but you can make out a few proud lines about the victories of a forgotten general. Historians still argue whether these commemorative columns were built more for honest remembrance or for bragging rights. Given the ego of Roman politics, you can make your own guess. The marble around you glows softly in the sun, like the whole plaza has been brushed with milk. Somewhere nearby, a man in a simple white toga stands by a board listing the day's notices: court hearings, auctions, perhaps a few divorce announcements, because apparently Rome had bulletin board drama too. You pause, pretending to read, but really you're just enjoying how the breeze slips through the arches and makes the scrolls flutter like sleepy wings. You wander toward a fountain, the kind that burbles so gently you'd swear it's trying not to disturb anyone. The water sparkles, clean and steady, and someone's placed a small clay cup at its edge for anyone who wants a sip. You dip your hand in, feeling that pleasant shock of coolness against the Roman heat. It's strange, this sense of familiarity, a moment of quiet civility that feels timeless. People here 2,000 years ago might have done the exact same thing, pausing for a sip, letting the water drip down their wrists before moving on. A pair of young scribes sits cross-legged nearby, each bent over wax tablets. Their styluses move with a rhythm that's almost musical. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. One of them mutters under his breath, and you catch a fragment, something about rent payments and overdue grain. Even in ancient Rome, paperwork waits for no one. You imagine a world where to-do lists are written in molten wax, a bit more poetic maybe, but still deeply annoying. On the far side of the plaza, a small crowd gathers near a low stage. A street storyteller has claimed a corner, his voice warm and slow. He's recounting the time Romulus vanished into a thundercloud, or so he says. You don't interrupt his myth, you just let it wash over you. Every now and then, someone tosses him a coin, and he nods in gratitude, mid-sentence. You wonder if anyone here really believes his story, or if they just enjoy the sound of it. It's easy to see why this place, for all its political noise, is also deeply human. There's laughter without malice, commerce without urgency, history without arrogance. Somewhere, a flute plays, a reedy, uncertain tune, like a lullaby trying to remember itself. The player sits cross-legged beside a stray dog, both of them blinking lazily in the light. The dog yawns first. The flute follows. As you drift farther in, you notice a set of steps leading to a shaded portico. You climb them slowly, each footstep echoing just enough to remind you of how hollow the world can feel when it's too big. Above the steps, statues stand guard. Stoic senators, gods, emperors. One of them, his face chipped by centuries, looks oddly kind, as though mid-laugh before the stone froze him. No one remembers his name now, not really. The plaque below him might once have held letters in bronze, but they're long gone, leaving only faint shadows of language. It's humbling, or maybe it's just peaceful. You take a seat on the cool stone bench, letting your shoulders drop, feeling that subtle vibration of a city still breathing underfoot. Rome isn't silent, it hums in layers. Distant hoofbeats, faint chatter, the sigh of the fountain, the lazy call of a pigeon overhead. If you close your eyes, you could almost mistake it for a seaside village, if not for the distant clink of bronze armor somewhere behind the basilica. Speaking of armor, there's a guard strolling by, but not in the dramatic, cinematic way you might imagine. His helmet is tucked under one arm, he's chewing on something, a date, perhaps, and he looks as unbothered as a man could possibly be. He pauses by a fruit seller, chats about the weather, and walks off again. It's oddly comforting to realize that even those tasked with keeping order sometimes just want a snack. A quirky detail you overhear from two gossiping women passing by. Apparently, someone in the city has been selling imported parrots that speak Greek. Yes, actual talking birds. One woman insists her neighbor's parrot greeted her with Kalimera before biting her finger. The other shakes her head, muttering something about omens. You tuck that little absurdity away. It's too delightful not to remember. Historians still argue whether animals in the forum were kept mainly for trade or companionship. Some records suggest monkeys performing tricks. Others mention dogs bred for beauty rather than work. But standing here, watching a few stray cats weave between columns, you suspect it was a mix of both, a place where even the smallest creatures were part of the city's heartbeat. You glance toward the horizon where the sunlight slants across the rooftops. It paints the city in gold and dust, a color that never really leaves Rome. You stretch, take a slow breath, and let the air settle in your lungs. Somewhere, someone begins reciting poetry in a voice so low it feels like a sigh. You can't quite catch the words, but the rhythm carries. And as you sit there, in this gentle, living stillness, you realize that the Forum isn't only marble and memory, it's comfort disguised as grandeur. A place built to impress, but equally suited for doing absolutely nothing. You linger a bit longer, not ready to move, listening to the cadence of voices fading and returning, like waves. A sleepy pigeon flutters onto the statue beside you, stares and coos softly, as if to remind you that life, even here, prefers the quiet moment. From the shaded portico, brushing faint dust from your tunic, or, well, from whatever soft modern fabric your imagination has loaned you tonight, and step back into the light. The sun is lower now, sliding down the marble facades, gilding every edge in honey. You can almost taste the warmth on the air, mingled with the smell of baked bread and the faint spice of garum sauce drifting from a nearby food stall. This, apparently, is the Roman idea of a snack. Something fermented, something fishy, and somehow completely acceptable before dinner. You make your way toward the quieter side of the Forum, where the bustle softens into a hum. Here, the temples seem to breathe more slowly. Their columns cast long, serene shadows across the stone floor, and bits of greenery sprout rebelliously between the cracks. Tiny bursts of nature, reminding the marble who really wins in the long run. The ground feels warm underfoot, radiating a day's worth of sunlight like a lazy animal. At the edge of the plaza stands a small shrine. Less imposing than the grand temples, but somehow more inviting. Its doorway is draped with faded garlands, and inside, a thin trail of incense curls upward, slow and dreamy. The scent is sweet, maybe myrrh or something close to it. You step inside. The air is cooler here, dense with quiet. A single priest tends the altar, adjusting offerings of fruit and flowers. He moves methodically, as though every gesture has been practiced since birth. When he notices you, he smiles faintly but doesn't speak, just nods, the universal greeting of people who understand silence better than words. You watch as he lights a small oil lamp, its flame flickering like a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether small shrines like this one were dedicated to household gods or served as miniature outposts for larger temples. Records blur, and ancient graffiti offers only cryptic hints. But standing here, it's easy to feel that this place belongs not to politics or power, but to personal peace, a kind of sanctuary for anyone who needs to pause between errands. You slip back outside, and the sunlight hits you again. The contrast feels like waking from a nap. A boy passes by carrying a basket of figs half covered with a cloth. He's humming something, a repetitive tune, the kind that could only survive generations because it refuses to be remembered or forgotten. He catches your eye for a moment, shrugs, and keeps walking. It's such a small, human moment, but somehow it's what stays with you. The fountain you passed earlier is now crowded with people. Not hurried, never that, but gathered like moths near light. A woman in a deep red palla dips her pitcher gracefully, not spilling a drop. Beside her, two older men argue softly about which consul first paved the forum's floor. You overhear one insisting it was Julius Caesar, while the other swears it was earlier, during Sulla's reign. Historians still argue about it, you murmur under your breath, and if anyone heard, they'd probably nod in agreement. Rome, after all, is built on debates that never end. You wander farther, past the fountain, to a row of marble benches where a group of children chase each other, their laughter echoing like wind chimes. One boy stumbles and falls, skinning his knee, and before he can cry, an older woman, maybe his grandmother, produces a small jar of honey and dabs it on the scrape. It's oddly sweet, both literally and figuratively. You recall reading somewhere that Romans used honey not just for food, but as a kind of first aid ointment, a practical kindness wrapped in sugar. There's a cart parked near the basilica steps, and its owner, a plump man with a beard that could house a family of sparrows, sells roasted nuts. He's calling out his prices in a rhythm that almost counts as music. Warm almonds, honeyed hazelnuts, 2 for a quadrans. You can't resist trying one. It's sweet, salty, and smoky all at once, a simple flavor that somehow feels ancient. You nod your thanks and keep moving, crunching quietly. As you pass the cart, your gaze catches on something odd, a painted wall tucked behind a column, covered in tiny scribbles. On closer look, it's graffiti, messages scratched and inked by hundreds of passing hands. Some are names, some are jokes, some are little love notes. One even reads, "Felix loves Julia, and may the gods forgive him." You can't help but smile. The modern instinct to leave your mark somewhere, literally, is apparently as old as civilization. A fringe historian once claimed that graffiti in the forum represents the first social media. You think about that as you trace one carved letter with your finger. People reaching out into the future, hoping someone might notice their words. And here you are, thousands of years later, doing exactly that. Maybe they weren't wrong. A shadow moves across the wall, and you look up to see a flock of pigeons lifting from a roof. Their wings flash silver for a moment before dissolving into the bright sky. The air smells faintly of dust and olives. You find yourself slowing down even more, feeling the pace of the place seep into your bones. This isn't a city designed for rushing, it's one designed for permanence. There's another small group gathered near the edge of the forum, this time listening to a philosopher, or at least a man pretending to be one. He's wearing a rough cloak and gesturing with both hands, explaining how true wisdom comes from knowing when to stop arguing. Ironically, 3 listeners are arguing with him about what that means. You resist the urge to laugh. The man sighs dramatically, throws his hands in the air, and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "You're all missing the point." You could swear that kind of exasperation hasn't changed in 2,000 years either. The marble beneath your feet begins to cool as the shadows stretch longer. The sounds around you thin out. Fewer merchants, fewer clinking coins. Even the birds seem to settle into their own kind of siesta. You find a low wall and sit, letting your weight sink into the stone, feeling its steady warmth fade. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Certain stones in the forum had spiritual resonance, a kind of hum that could align your soul with the gods if you sat quietly enough. Was it superstition or just poetic daydreaming? Hard to tell. But as you rest here, listening to the murmur of the city slowing to its late afternoon rhythm, you can see why they might think so. There's something grounding about it, a hum beneath thought, beneath time. A breeze picks up, carrying the faint clatter of a chariot somewhere in the distance. The sound doesn't rush, it glides, echoing down the marble corridors before dissolving into silence. You close your eyes for a moment, and the sensation is almost meditative. You remember how, earlier, you promised yourself you'd stay awake through the whole thing. But this is the kind of place where even your determination begins to soften. You lean back, tracing the sky with your eyes, watching a single cloud drift lazily across the blue. Rome's heart beats slowly now, steady as your own pulse. For all its grandeur, the forum is, at its core, a quiet companion, a place that whispers rather than shouts. You realize that its peaceful side isn't rare, it's just overlooked. Everyone imagines Rome as noise and conquest, but here, between columns and fading voices, it feels like the city has been holding its breath for centuries, waiting for someone to notice the stillness. You exhale, matching it, to notice the stillness. Low wall, letting the warmth of the stone seep reluctantly from your back, and start wandering toward the Basilica Julia. The sunlight here is gentler, diffused through the arches and columns that frame the building like a series of elegant, slanted windows. The forum feels quieter now, as if the afternoon has stretched its legs and decided to rest. Footsteps echo faintly across the marble, mingling with the distant calls of birds perched on broken pediments. The Basilica Julia was once a center of legal proceedings, a place where the hum of human order was tangible, almost physical. You imagine it as it was, long rows of seats rising like gentle stairs, magistrates presiding over disputes, citizens gathered to watch the machinery of law in action. Today, it's stripped to its skeleton. The roof is long gone, leaving only rows of fractured columns, but the bones of justice are still here, whispering beneath your fingers as you trace the grooves of marble worn smooth by centuries of sandals. You step lightly across the central nave, pausing to take in the scale. Even in ruin, the basilica has presence. Its rectangular outline, punctuated by repeating arches, stretches farther than your imagination first allows. Light filters in from above, casting stripes across the floor, making every crack and imperfection glow with subtle golden warmth. The effect is almost hypnotic. Somewhere nearby, a pigeon flutters past, its wings catching the light like silver. It lands on a fallen column, ruffling its feathers and cooing softly. You realize that life continues in small, almost imperceptible ways, even where empires once demanded spectacle. there's something comforting in this slow, natural rhythm. You wander closer to the center where the magistrate's platform would have been. Imagine sitting here 2,000 years ago, the weight of responsibility pressing on your shoulders, the eyes of citizens fixed upon every gesture, every word. Yet even in this context, there is humor and humanity. Ancient records reveal that sometimes lawyers would make grandiose speeches filled with flowery metaphors, only to be interrupted by someone loudly criticizing the cost of the ink or the delivery of the scroll. Historians still argue whether these interruptions were common practice or simply exaggerated by later storytellers. But either way, you can almost hear the echoes. Near the edge of the basilica, you notice faint inscriptions carved into a column. They are worn almost smooth, but you can just make out fragments of names and dates. Someone, perhaps a young clerk or a visiting citizen, has left a mark for posterity, a tiny whisper of existence amidst monumental stone. You run your fingers over the faint letters, feeling a strange connection across time. It's almost like shaking hands with someone who lived centuries before you, bound together by curiosity and the need to leave something behind. A small breeze drifts through the open arches, carrying the scent of dust, distant olives, and sun-warmed marble. You inhale slowly, letting it fill your lungs. Somewhere behind the basilica, the faint clatter of a cart rolling over cobblestones mixes with a child's laugh. The sound is gentle, almost musical, a reminder that daily life continued here in rhythms that were not recorded by statues or inscriptions, but by ordinary moments. In the far corner, you notice a fragment of mosaic embedded in the floor. It depicts a geometric pattern, faded to soft earth tones, with occasional flashes of blue that still manage to catch the light. You kneel down to examine it, imagining the artisan who placed each tiny stone so carefully, aware that their work might outlast them by centuries. It is a detail both grand and mundane, a quiet testament to human patience. Nearby, a stray cat winds its way through the ruins, brushing against columns and pausing to watch a bird hop along the marble. Its movements are deliberate, fluid, almost ceremonial. You follow it for a moment with your eyes, marveling at how the smallest creatures inhabit spaces just as ancient and storied as any emperor or magistrate. Historians still debate how often ordinary Romans actually attended proceedings in the basilica. Some argue that most citizens observed only during particularly scandalous trials, while others insist that regular attendance was a form of civic duty. You like to imagine that people came not for duty, but out of curiosity, because even in the shadow of law, life's small, quiet dramas are endlessly compelling. You wander toward what once was the central aisle, imagining the rustle of togas as judges, lawyers, and citizens moved through the space. Somewhere under your feet, the stone bears the faint grooves of footsteps that echo across centuries. You notice a small, chipped capital on one of the columns, almost whimsical in its imperfection. You smile, thinking that even the grandest buildings have moments of humor, left for anyone attentive enough to see them. A few steps away, sunlight catches on a piece of bronze embedded in the stone, a small fragment of a decorative relief, worn and pitted. Its original purpose is lost to time, but in its reflection, you can almost see the bustling forum beyond. Merchants calling prices, children darting between legs, the occasional magistrate scowling at a missed argument. The relic is both intimate and monumental, a bridge between daily life and historical grandeur. You pause and take a slow breath, letting the soft light and subtle breeze envelop you. In the basilica, the noise of the outside world has faded, replaced by a sense of patience and measured rhythm. Life here was ordered, yes, but it also had moments of unexpected softness. a laugh in the wrong place, a forgotten coin, a child's shout echoing across marble floors. A playful, almost comic detail surfaces. Some legal tablets from this era contained clauses so specific that modern scholars have marveled at their mundane obsession with details. One mentions the exact day and hour a servant must feed a goose. You imagine a young clerk, secretly amused, scratching a tiny note in the margin. Goose still alive, barely. Even in a place of law, humanity finds a way to peek through. As the sun continues its descent, the shadows lengthen, draping the basilica in a gentle, diffused glow. You take one last slow walk down the central nave, letting your fingers brush the cool marble, feeling the subtle curves worn smooth by centuries of passage. The building hums softly beneath your feet, a resonance you can't measure but can sense, a quiet reminder that even in ruin, presence persists. You step toward the exit, turning for a final glance. The Basilica Julia rises like a silent teacher, patient and unassuming, holding the traces of human stories without demanding attention. You realize that the grandeur of Rome isn't only in its emperors or statues. It's in places like this where the smallest gestures, the quietest steps, and the mundane rituals leave a mark as enduring as marble. You exhale, feeling the soft pull of history through your body, a gentle awareness that the city is still alive, not in triumph or conquest, but in memory, motion, and the soft rhythm of everyday life. Motion and Basilica Julia, letting the warmth of the late afternoon sun wash over your face, and wander toward the area where the Temple of Saturn rises in its dignified, partially ruined glory. Its columns stretch upward like fingers frozen in the act of reaching, the entablature chipped but still proud. You pause a moment to let your eyes trace each line, each imperfection, feeling the weight of centuries pressing lightly on your shoulders. The forum here is quieter, slower. You can almost hear the echo of your own breathing above the faint hum of distant footsteps. The Temple of Saturn, you recall, housed the state treasury. Coins clinked here as hands passed gold and silver, a rhythm of wealth and authority that shaped the city in ways both grand and subtle. Standing among the columns now, it's strange to consider that the same space once held not only the empire's material riches, but also its ambitions, debts, and occasional scandals. Historians still argue whether the treasury's placement here was purely practical or deeply symbolic, a deliberate reminder that financial power underpins governance as surely as marble underpins Rome itself. You wander along the temple's edge, noticing the small details. The grooves worn into the steps from countless sandals, the faint inscriptions near the base that mark donations and decrees long forgotten, and tiny tufts of green pushing stubbornly through cracks in the stone. A pigeon flutters past, landing atop a column with a quiet coo. It rocks gently, one foot tucked under its chest, surveying the plaza as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Nearby, a street vendor arranges small clay figurines on a wooden board. Some depict gods and goddesses, others gladiators or tiny animals. He waves lazily at passersby, but no one seems in a hurry. You imagine a Roman child here, pressing a nose to the table, fascinated by the delicate details, perhaps trying to guess which figure might be magical or lucky. A modern fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some believe that figurines like these were used not just for play or decoration, but as talismans to influence daily life, small charms to sway fortune. Whether true or not, the idea feels charmingly plausible in this tranquil moment. You follow the edge of the temple to a shaded alcove where a pair of old men sits, discussing grain shipments and the latest consular edicts. One gestures with a folded scroll, emphasizing a point with a slow, deliberate movement, while the other nods absently, stroking his chin. Their conversation is half business, half idle gossip, a reminder that even in places tied to wealth and power, human concerns are simple: enough food, enough security, enough sun on your shoulders. A light breeze stirs the scent of baked bread from a nearby stall, mingling with the faint metallic tang of coins and the earthy aroma of the sun-warmed stone. You inhale, letting the mixture settle in your chest. It's grounding, ordinary, yet layered with history. You take a small step forward, imagining the temple in its prime. Priests in flowing robes counting coins, magistrates inspecting ledgers, citizens offering votive gifts of all shapes and sizes. You pause before one of the temple's central columns, letting your hand glide over its roughened surface. Someone, centuries ago, has carved initials and a crude heart into the marble. You smile at the smallness of it, a whisper across time, private and defiant against the monumentality surrounding it. There's humor in it, a reminder that people are people, regardless of the era. Looking around, you notice a few stray dogs winding through the ruins, noses low to the ground. One of them pauses beside a puddle, drinking slowly. You remember reading that dogs in ancient Rome were valued both for companionship and for guarding homes and property. Some were even trained for the streets, a living security system. You can't help but chuckle at the image of a particularly clever canine negotiating a coin or two. A group of children passes nearby, chasing a ball carved from worn leather. Their laughter echoes between columns, bouncing off the stone and settling softly on your ears. It's a sound you recognize from any era, any city, a reminder that joy has always been universal, unaffected by politics, empire, or wealth. One of the boys trips, scrapes a knee, and gets a bandage from a passing woman. You tuck that moment away, the ordinary tenderness of care in the midst of monumental history. You wander further along the plaza, toward the base of the temple, where the remains of steps suggest the grand entrance once climbed by important figures in flowing togas. You imagine a senator here, perhaps late in life, pausing to glance back at the city, silently counting blessings or debts. Somewhere beneath your feet, faint impressions of their sandals remain, carved subtly into the stone by centuries of traffic. Historians still debate the exact rituals performed here. Did citizens regularly offer coins in homage to Saturn? Were sacrifices more symbolic than literal? There's no definitive answer, which leaves space for your imagination to wander, filling in the quiet spaces with plausible human activity. You let yourself do that now, picturing small offerings left at the temple steps, coins glinting in the sun, prayers whispered under breath. You notice a shadow moving along the plaza. A young scribe walks carefully, scroll tucked under arm, balancing a small box of wax tablets in one hand. He navigates past puddles and uneven stones with practiced care. You follow silently, noting the deliberate rhythm of his steps. The movement is almost meditative, a reminder that work, no matter how mundane, carries its own quiet dignity. A stray gust carries a faint tune softly, an improvisational melody that drifts over the marble like smoke. The music feels ephemeral yet eternal, a perfect accompaniment to the slow, measured pace of the forum in this quiet hour. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it mingle with the warmth of the sun, the hum of distant voices, and the faint cooing of pigeons. There's a small, almost comic detail you can't resist noting. Some Romans believed that Saturn, god of time and harvest, would occasionally wander the forum disguised as a beggar, testing the generosity of citizens. You chuckle at the thought, imagining a god in worn sandals, inspecting coins and fruit, nodding approvingly at good behavior. The idea is whimsical, yet somehow fitting in this peaceful, lightly chaotic space. As the sun continues its slow descent, the shadows deepen, draping the temple of Saturn in gold and shadow. You take a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the air settle. The forum's heartbeat here is quiet, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. A rhythm of stones, footsteps, water, and life persisting through time. You step back, letting the column edges guide you toward the next part of the forum. The serenity here is subtle, found in gentle sounds, soft light, and human traces both monumental and minuscule. You realize that even in ruins, the forum's pulse endures, not as spectacle, not as power, but as quiet witness to centuries of ordinary existence. Quiet witness to centuries of ordinary existence. Feeling the smooth transition from sun-drenched marble to the shaded corridors that border the forum. The air is cooler here, carrying faint traces of olive oil, warm stone, and something earthy, maybe the remnants of a small garden tucked into a forgotten corner. You notice the arches forming gentle shadows across the paving stones, their symmetry softening the sharp angles of the plaza. The movement here is slower, almost contemplative, a quiet pause in the rhythm of Rome. Your steps take you toward the Curia Julia, the Senate House, though it's far quieter than it might have been in its prime. Imagine senators draped in flowing togas, voices rising and falling in debate, gestures punctuating the air like punctuation marks. Today, the echoes of argument are replaced by a delicate wind weaving through broken windows and the occasional coo of a pigeon perched in a high corner. Historians still argue about exactly how vocal the Senate sessions were. Were they fiery spectacles or restrained assemblies? Standing here, it's easy to imagine both. You approach the main entrance, noticing the worn steps and traces of bronze fittings that once held doors grand enough to inspire awe. A stray cat slinks along the edge, tail high, padding silently across the marble. Somewhere nearby, a young boy carries a bundle of scrolls, walking slowly so as not to spill them. You can picture him practicing careful balance for hours, earning his place among apprentices who moved quietly yet purposefully through the forum. The interior of the Curia feels unexpectedly intimate. Light spills through gaps in the roof, casting shifting patterns on the floor. The walls are bare, but for faint inscriptions, echoes of legislation and civic decrees. You brush your fingers across the marble, feeling grooves worn by centuries of hands. Each one a whisper of authority, ambition, or maybe mere curiosity. You imagine the scene centuries ago, a magistrate calling order, a senator clearing his throat, a young clerk nervously adjusting a scroll. Outside, sunlight pools across the steps, and you can almost hear distant chatter from the forum's other corners. Inside, the air smells faintly of dust and wax, mingling with the faint scent of oil lamps. A quirky historical tidbit floats into your mind. Some senators supposedly kept small charms or talismans hidden beneath their robes for luck or protection during particularly contentious debates. Perhaps a tiny stone, a carved bone, or even a miniature figurine of a deity. Whether this was common or rare is lost to history, but imagining it adds a playful humanity to the imposing chamber. You wander slowly through the main hall, noticing the faint lines marking where benches and platforms once stood. Someone, long ago, has scratched a doodle into the floor, an almost comic depiction of a toga-wrapped figure holding a scroll upside down. It feels like a wink across time, a tiny moment of humor amid formality. You can't help but smile. Outside the Curia, sunlight catches a fragment of a bronze statue, long decayed, leaving only a ghostly silhouette. The figure once likely towered over the plaza, an emblem of authority, frozen in bronze for all to admire. Now it tilts slightly, leaning toward the earth, almost as if nodding to the quieter rhythms of daily life around it. You pause near the corner of the building, noticing a small group of children playing tag among the columns. Their laughter is a soft counterpoint to the solemnity of marble and history. One boy trips, scraping his elbow, and is promptly tended by an older sister who produces a bit of cloth and a dab of honey, a minor remedy, timeless and simple. You tuck this memory away, a quiet emblem of ordinary care in the midst of monumental structures. A breeze drifts through the arches, carrying with it a faint tune. Someone nearby is plucking a lyre gently, the notes weaving around the sound of footsteps and distant conversation. You pause, letting the melody guide your attention outward. You imagine citizens pausing mid-step to listen, absorbing both music and sun in the same breath. Historians still argue about the acoustics of the Curia Julia, whether speeches carried with the clarity suggested in ancient sources, or if the space was intentionally designed to muffle dissent. You lean against a column and test the sound, murmuring a few words and noting the soft echo that answers back. Even centuries later, the building communicates. Further down, a merchant arranges pottery on a small wooden cart, the colors vibrant even against the muted tones of stone. A passerby pauses, examining a vase with a delicate swirl pattern, likely unaware that similar wares were traded here thousands of years ago. Life continues in echoes, repeating gestures and decisions that feel both familiar and distant. You drift toward the outer courtyard, where sunlight splashes across low walls. Small tufts of grass and wildflowers push through cracks in the paving stones. You notice a particularly brave dandelion, golden and resilient, growing between two slabs. It strikes you as emblematic. Even in spaces designed for permanence and authority, life finds its own gentle path. A stray detail tickles your imagination. Some scholars have suggested that certain tiles in the Senate House were laid with subtle geometric patterns meant to signify the balance of power. Whether intentional or coincidental, the effect endures. Your eyes follow the lines almost hypnotically, grounding you in rhythm and symmetry. You linger, tracing the edges of marble and stone with a gentle curiosity. The Curia Julia is not merely a relic, it is a living classroom, offering lessons not in law, but in patience, observation, and the understated poetry of human effort. You realize that the forum's quieter corners, this one included, carry the pulse of ordinary life just as strongly as the grand ceremonies once did. The sun dips lower now, casting long shadows that stretch across the forum like gentle fingers. You take a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the warmth fade slightly, replaced by the soft coolness of evening. Every sound, the distant chatter, the cooing of pigeons, the scrape of sandals across marble, feels magnified in its serenity. You step back, letting the quiet embrace you. The forum's rhythm continues, subtle and persistent, a heartbeat beneath the grandeur. You feel yourself matching it, slow and steady, as the afternoon folds gently into early evening, carrying you forward toward the next quiet corner of history to explore. You forward toward the next word, leaving the solemn Curia Julia behind, and wander toward the open area surrounding the Temple of Castor and Pollux. The sunlight has softened now, casting long, warm shadows that stretch lazily across the marble and paving stones. The forum has shifted in tone, from mid-afternoon energy to a gentle, reflective calm. You notice the faint rustle of leaves from small trees tucked between columns and along the edges of the plaza, their greenery a quiet rebellion against the pervasive stone. The three surviving columns of the Temple of Castor and Pollux rise gracefully, skeletal yet proud, their fluted shafts catching the light in gentle streaks of gold. You pause at the base, letting your hand trail over the cool marble. Imagine it 2,000 years ago. Citizens gathering for ceremonies, priests moving with solemn grace, and the occasional senator making a show of piety while plotting political maneuvering in his mind. Historians still argue whether the temple's primary purpose was more symbolic than functional, or if the legendary twins really held the sway over civic matters that later stories suggest. A small breeze stirs, carrying the mingled scents of baked bread, dust, and the faint tang of the Tiber. Somewhere nearby, a young boy skips along, balancing a small amphora on his shoulder. He trips slightly, but rights it with a practiced grace. It is these small, ordinary gestures that reveal the forum's quieter heartbeat, life moving forward, delicate and persistent, in parallel with the monumental ambitions of empires. You wander toward the center of the plaza, noticing subtle marks on the paving stones, tiny impressions of sandals, hooves, and the occasional scratch where someone, long ago, might have carved initials or left a message. The forum is full of whispers. You just have to lean close enough to hear them. In one faint groove, you imagine the hurried footsteps of a messenger racing across the plaza, scroll clutched tightly under his arm, intent on delivering vital news before the sun set. A group of pigeons flutters overhead, their wings catching the soft light like fragments of silver. One lands on the base of a column, pecking curiously at a stray grain. You watch it for a moment, appreciating the peaceful normalcy it represents, an existence so small and deliberate that it seems entirely unaware of the grandeur surrounding it. Nearby, a merchant arranges clay oil lamps for sale, their surfaces catching the fading light. Each lamp is slightly different, a reflection of the artisan's hand and care. Some have tiny images of deities, others simple geometric patterns. You pick one up imaginatively, feeling the smooth weight of it in your palm. The simplicity is charming, yet the thought that these objects passed through countless hands, across centuries, brings a sense of wonder. A fringe detail surfaces. Some historians speculate that merchants would leave small, hidden offerings in the lamps for luck or prosperity, tiny charms tucked under the clay before firing. You smile at the notion, imagining a young artisan secretly slipping a tiny token into a lamp while murmuring a wish. It seems fitting in this slow, reflective moment. A few steps away, you notice a cluster of children weaving between columns and sun-drenched patches of marble. One boy stops to pick up a stray coin, inspecting it with curiosity before tossing it back into the sunlight. Their laughter and chatter is soft and unhurried, merging with the subtle hum of the plaza. Watching them, you realize that daily life in Rome had its joys, its mischief, its ordinary magic, even in the shadow of monumental architecture. The temple's shadow stretches across the plaza, cooling the marble beneath it. You follow the line of shade, letting your gaze wander over the distant ruins of the forum's other temples and basilicas. Faint inscriptions catch your eye, remnants of dedications long faded, but still hinting at devotion, gratitude, and sometimes vanity. You trace them with your eyes, imagining the hands that carved them, the intent behind each letter, and the slow passing of centuries that softened their edges. Historians still debate how the citizens interacted with these sacred spaces in daily life. Were they purely ceremonial or integrated into commerce, conversation, and play? Standing here, it seems clear that the forum was never a single-purpose space. Ritual, socializing, negotiation, and observation all intertwined effortlessly, forming a living mosaic of human activity. You drift toward a low, sun-warmed wall and sit, letting your fingers brush the marble. The warmth seeps slowly into your skin, grounding you in the quiet pulse of the forum. Nearby, a pair of scribes pauses from their tablets, exchanging soft words and glances. One mutters something about taxes and deliveries, the other laughs quietly, shaking their head. You can almost imagine a tiny shared joke lost to the centuries, a fleeting human connection echoing faintly in the stones. The distant clatter of a cart moving over uneven stones reaches your ears, a reminder that commerce never fully ceases. You follow the sound with your eyes and see a man carefully guiding a laden cart past the remains of columns. He nods briefly to a passerby, the universal acknowledgement of presence and courtesy. Even as empires rise and fall, life's rhythms persist, mundane, resilient, and quietly beautiful. A stray pigeon hops near your feet, pecking at something unseen. You notice the subtle glint of a coin in the sunlight, half buried in marble dust. You pick it up imaginatively, feeling the cool metal, imagining the hands that pressed it into existence. Somewhere in this quiet, ordinary act, history feels tactile and immediate. Finally, you take a slow breath, letting the gentle warmth of the afternoon and the soft, layered sounds of the forum settle in your chest. The temple of Castor and Pollux rises behind you, its columns casting long shadows that feel like quiet arms embracing the plaza. Here, the forum is not spectacle, not empire, not grandeur, but rhythm, patience, and ordinary life, layered over centuries and made enduring by stone, marble, and the gentle persistence of humanity. You rise, brushing off your tunic, and take a last slow turn around the temple. Pigeons coo, children laugh, and the breeze carries the faint scent of baked bread and sun-warmed stone. Every detail whispers continuity, a place where life flows quietly alongside history, where the monumental and the mundane meet without fanfare, and where, if you listen closely, you can hear centuries of ordinary existence humming softly beneath your feet. Humming softly in Pollux, moving toward the Basilica Aemilia, its partially ruined columns standing like quiet sentinels over the plaza. The late afternoon sun slants gently across the marble floors, painting long, mellow stripes that shift with every slow movement of the clouds above. The forum here feels suspended, a world apart from the political machinations and clamor you imagine from centuries past. The air is warm, perfumed faintly with dust, stone, and the subtle aroma of olive oil and sun-baked bread. The Basilica Aemilia once served as a center for commerce and law, a place where citizens gathered to conduct business, negotiate contracts, or perhaps eavesdrop on gossip while pretending to be absorbed in civic matters. Today, it is quiet, the clatter of commerce replaced by the soft coo of pigeons, the distant scrape of sandals over marble, and the occasional whisper of a light breeze weaving through fractured columns. Historians still argue about the precise functions of certain rooms here. Were they reserved strictly for financial dealings, or did they also serve ceremonial purposes? The ambiguity invites imagination, and you let it drift lazily through your mind. You follow the shadows of the columns, noticing the smooth wear where countless feet once passed. A stray cat weaves between your legs, pausing to peer at the distant horizon, tail flicking gently. Somewhere nearby, a merchant arranges small clay oil lamps, their faint geometric patterns catching the light. You pause to imagine a Roman child studying the designs, hands tracing the shapes, curiosity lighting their face. A quirky detail surfaces. Some historians suggest that merchants in the Basilica Aemilia would occasionally hide small charms or tokens within the folds of goods, believed to bring luck to buyers or prosperity to sellers. You picture a tiny ceramic figure tucked under a pile of grain, a silent witness to centuries of trade and superstition. It's a small human touch amid grand architecture. You drift toward a partially collapsed arch, the sunlight glinting across the remnants of bronze fittings that once held doors grand enough to inspire awe. You brush your hand over the cool marble, tracing the grooves and imperfections worn smooth by centuries of passing sandals. Somewhere in your mind, you imagine a magistrate here, quietly observing a dispute, adjusting a scroll, noting a detail only he would care to notice. The scene is simultaneously formal and strangely intimate. A gentle breeze carries laughter from a group of children playing nearby, their footsteps echoing softly across the marble. One boy trips over a low stone, scrapes his elbow, and receives a quick dab of honey from an older sister. The simplicity of the moment, the small care, the unspoken bond, is striking against the backdrop of grand, solemn architecture. You pause, letting the warmth of human presence sink into your chest. Nearby, a young scribe sits cross-legged, stylus in hand, scratching figures onto a wax tablet. You notice the slow precision of each stroke, the soft rasp of stylus against wax, almost musical. Historians still argue about how widespread literacy was among ordinary Romans. Some suggest a privileged few could read and write fluently, while others relied on clerks like this one for communication. Watching him work, you appreciate the patient dedication required, a rhythm in itself, quiet and unhurried. You wander along the edge of the basilica, noticing the faint impressions of ancient coins left in the soft marble, perhaps dropped by distracted citizens. A pigeon hops near, pecking delicately at the surface as if inspecting these old traces of commerce. You can almost imagine the scene centuries ago. Merchants tallying profits, citizens haggling gently, the soft clink of coin, and the occasional outburst of frustration. Ordinary life continues, the mundane rhythm enduring, even as empires rise and fall. A stray detail amuses you. Apparently, some Romans believed that the marble itself could absorb fortune. Leaving a coin pressed briefly against the stone was thought to invite prosperity. You imagine a hopeful citizen pressing a coin into the marble before hurrying off to dinner, unaware that you are now tracing the same stone thousands of years later. The thought feels whimsical, yet strangely comforting. The Basilica Aemilia's open halls are bathed in soft golden light, and the breeze carries a faint musical note, a stringed instrument somewhere, playing lightly, perhaps improvising a tune that blends with the hum of life around it. You pause to listen, letting the music mingle with the distant clatter of carts and the soft voices of passers-by. Even in ruins, the space hums with energy, not loud or insistent, but steady and persistent. You step to the center of the plaza, letting your gaze drift over the low walls, the worn steps, and the scattered fragments of marble. Each piece holds stories, some monumental, some intimately ordinary. You imagine someone centuries ago pausing in the same spot, perhaps leaning on a column and letting the warmth of the day soak into their shoulders, listening to the slow rhythm of life in the forum. A young couple passes by, whispering softly to each other, their laughter blending with the ambient hum. It is one of those moments that feels timeless, human connection, tender and fleeting, preserved in memory and imagination. You let the scene settle over you, a gentle balm in the soft light of the late afternoon. The sun continues its slow descent, casting long shadows across the marble and the low walls. You take a deep breath, feeling the warmth fade slightly, replaced by the soft coolness of early evening. Every detail, the cooing pigeons, the whispers of breeze, the gentle laughter, the faint echoes of footsteps, feels like a note in a quiet symphony. You realize that the forum's true rhythm isn't in its grandeur or politics, but in the persistence of ordinary life, layered across centuries. You wander slowly toward a shaded alcove, letting the warm marble and soft light wash over you one last time. The Basilica Amelia, though partially ruined, holds a quiet dignity. It speaks of patience, observation, and the understated poetry of everyday human activity, reminding you that history is lived, not only witnessed. You exhale, matching the gentle rhythm of the Forum as the day edges softly toward evening. Rhythm of the Forum as the day edges softly, feeling the sun dip lower, bathing the Forum in soft amber light. Shadows stretch across the plaza, elongating columns and statues until they seem almost like living silhouettes. The air carries a faint chill, mingling with the warmth left in the marble from a long day of sunlight. You inhale slowly, letting the scent of baked bread, olive oil, and sun-warmed stone fill your lungs. This hour, the quietest of the day, has a rhythm all its own. Your steps take you toward the Temple of Vesta, the small circular sanctuary whose hearth once burned eternally. Imagine the Vestal virgins tending the fire, moving with careful, deliberate grace, aware that even a flicker of negligence might invite whispers of scandal. Today, only the circular base remains, but the air seems to hum faintly, as if carrying the memory of centuries of devotion. Historians still debate whether the Vestals wielded true influence over political affairs, or if their importance was largely ceremonial. Standing here, it is easy to believe in both possibilities. You pause at the temple's edge, letting your hand trail over the cool marble. Tiny tufts of greenery push through the cracks, stubborn and bright against the neutral stone. Somewhere nearby, a pigeon hops from one slab to another, pecking delicately, unbothered by the passage of time. Life persists, small and quiet, even amid monuments that have witnessed centuries of empire. A merchant arranges his goods on a low wooden table, clay oil lamps, small figurines, and beads of colored glass. He moves slowly, deliberately, as if honoring the slow pulse of the Forum itself. You imagine a child peering at the lamps, trying to decide which one might bring luck, which one might just be pretty. A fringe detail drifts into your mind. Some scholars suggest that these lamps were occasionally used to leave secret messages, tiny tokens of communication hidden in plain sight. The thought adds a whimsical layer to the quiet scene. You step toward the center of the plaza, feeling the cool marble beneath your feet, tracing the faint grooves left by centuries of sandals, hooves, and coins. Children play nearby, chasing each other in slow, deliberate arcs that echo through the stone corridors. One boy trips, scrapes a knee, and is immediately tended by a sister who presses a dab of honey to the wound. The ordinary kindness feels amplified against the grandeur of ruins, a reminder that life has always persisted in small, intimate gestures. Historians still argue about how public spaces in the Forum were used during downtime. Were citizens strictly observers, or did they treat these spaces as extensions of their homes and social lives? Watching the soft interactions around you, it seems clear that both were true. The Forum was civic stage and intimate playground at once. You wander closer to the Temple of Concord, noting the interplay of shadow and light on its partially preserved columns. The air smells faintly of dust and incense, and somewhere in the distance, a soft, plucked melody drifts over the plaza. You pause, letting it mingle with the gentle hum of human presence, the faint chatter of a merchant, the cooing of pigeons, the laughter of children. The Forum's quiet rhythm is almost tangible now, a soft heartbeat beneath your feet. A stray dog curls up in a shaded corner, tail tucked under its body, watching the world with mild curiosity. You notice a tiny coin lying near a column's base, half buried in marble dust. You pick it up imaginatively, feeling the weight of centuries in the small, smooth disc. A whimsical thought surfaces. Some Romans believed coins left in sacred spaces could attract fortune or favor. You smile at the enduring human desire to leave a mark, however small, in a world that will outlast you. You walk slowly to the edge of the forum, taking in the view of distant ruins and sun-tinged hills beyond. Shadows deepen, stretching the arches and columns until they appear almost fluid, moving with the subtle rhythm of wind and light. The air cools further, carrying the faint scent of herbs and the distant clatter of a departing cart. You realize that even the ruins, the stones, and the fragments of temples hold life. Not loud or commanding, but persistent and gentle, like a whisper across time. A child stops to inspect a small fragment of marble, turning it in her hands with curiosity. A parent points softly, explaining the grooves and patterns. You observe the scene with a gentle smile. Even in the forum's quietest corners, learning and wonder endure, as natural and persistent as the stone itself. Finally, you take a slow, deep breath, letting your senses absorb the final warmth of sunlight and the soft coolness of approaching evening. The forum, in all its quiet splendor, hums beneath you. The marble, the columns, the faintly scented breeze, the small lives threading through space and time. It is not spectacle or power that gives the place its enduring magic, but the rhythm of ordinary life woven across centuries. You pause near a low wall, sitting and letting the soft glow of the late sun settle over you. Birds coo, children laugh, a merchant arranges his wares one last time, and the gentle wind stirs through the columns. Life, ordinary and persistent, continues in quiet harmony. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the calm of the forum to seep into your bones, slow and steady, like the pulse of the city itself. Now, as the day edges gently into evening, let your mind relax further. Feel the stone beneath you, cool yet holding whispers of sunlight, and notice the soft cadence of life slowing all around. The pigeons have settled, their feathers ruffling lightly in the breeze. The children's laughter fades into distant echoes, gentle and musical, like wind chimes at the end of a long day. Even the faint hum of merchants and passers-by softens, creating a serene, almost meditative rhythm that envelops the forum. Breathe slowly. Let the warmth of the sun, the faint scent of olive oil and stone, and the soft, layered sounds settle inside your chest. You are part of this rhythm, a quiet observer amidst centuries of human existence. The buildings, the ruins, the fragments of marble, they all speak in whispers now, telling you that life persists in small, ordinary moments, patient and enduring. Imagine the forum as it folds into dusk, shadows lengthening, light softening, the air cooling. The temples, basilicas, and columns rest, holding stories of law, commerce, devotion, and simple human gestures. Even in ruin, they breathe a gentle pulse that matches your own slow heartbeat. Let yourself sink into this calm, feeling every detail, the touch of marble, the scent of baked bread, the soft coo of birds. Fade into a quiet harmony that carries you toward rest. Now, dim your thoughts like the fading light, releasing each fragment of the day. The city hums beneath you, gentle, patient, eternal. Your mind slows, your muscles release, and the forum's quiet embrace carries you softly, like a lullaby whispered across centuries. End of script. Sweet dreams.